night, and the winds will ease down further until the cloud thickens and we start to see wet weather coming into Northern Ireland by dawn. With the clearer skies and as the winds ease, we could see some pockets of frost across Scotland, but for most of us, we'll start Tuesday at 4 or 5 degrees. Many in the east will start dry and bright, but the rain will spread into the west and then become pretty much across all parts by lunchtime. The heaviest rain, though, over Western Hills. The rain could cause some disruption because after Storm Isha, where we had quite a bit of rain falling, extra rainfall may cause some flooding issues, and then the winds continue to strengthen. Actually quite a mild day tomorrow, but not feeling all that mild with the wind and the rain. And the winds continue to strengthen during Tuesday evening, particularly across the north. The winds won't be as strong as with Storm Isha, but because Storm Isha has only just cleared, it could have caused some structural issues. So we do have warnings in place, a broad yellow warning, gusts of 55 to 65 miles an hour, and the amber warning across northern and western Scotland, where gusts could touch 80 miles an hour.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show, every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, you're with GB News. And the breaking news tonight is that the UK and the United States have carried out joint airstrikes against Houthi targets in Yemen. They say taking out Houthi missile storage sites and launchers in the second set of coordinated strikes against the Iran-backed militants there. The UK and the US once again carrying those joint airstrikes against Houthi targets in Yemen. Well, tonight, Defence Secretary Grant Shapps said joint UK-US airstrikes against Houthi sites in Yemen will deal another blow to their limited stockpiles and ability to threaten global trade. That breaking news to us just in the last hour. Well, also happening this evening, Israel has proposed a 2-month ceasefire in Gaza in return for the release of all hostages. That's according to the local news agency Axios. Israel put forward the proposal through Qatari and Egyptian mediators, and it includes 2 months of a pause in the fighting as part of a multi-phase deal, which would include the release of all remaining hostages in Gaza. And within the last couple of hours, the government's Rwanda plan was also the subject of breaking news tonight. It suffered something of a blow in the House of Lords. Peers were discussing just how safe the country Rwanda is. And they voted to delay the government's flagship bill, 214 votes to 171. That's a majority of 43, until, they said, ministers could show that Rwanda was a safe country. Just last week, Rishi Sunak urging the House of Lords to do the right thing and endorse his government's flagship anti-migrant policy aimed at deterring illegal migrants from getting into small boats and crossing the English Channel. Well, a new weather system is on its way and weather warnings have been issued. It's a new storm called Storm Jocelyn and it's heading for the UK right now, just as the country recovers from Storm Isha. 2 people died yesterday and tens of thousands remain without power after the UK was battered by high winds. Gusts of up to 100 miles an hour and heavy rain caused major travel disruption with flooding and fallen trees, forcing planes to be diverted and trains to be cancelled. And ScotRail has announced it's again suspending services from 7 o'clock tomorrow as the new weather front approaches. So there'll be no trains on Wednesday morning either, ScotRail says, while they check the lines for damage. And lastly, Downing Street has denied the government's pursuing an anti-BBC agenda after announcing a raft of reforms as part of a review into the corporation. Under new plans, Ofcom could gain more powers over BBC News website articles if they don't meet relevant standards. Government recommendations imply Ofcom should be given increased oversight over the BBC's online services, including its YouTube channel. The Prime Minister said today that the BBC is not immune to scrutiny. That's the news on GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker. This is Britain's News Channel.
Hello and welcome to Headliners, your first look at Tuesday's newspapers. I'm Andrew Doyle and joining me tonight are 2 comedy heavyweights, Steve Hands of Stone N. Allen and Nick the Cumbrian Hurricane Dixon. I think that works for you. You've got a very steely, brawny look about you. But you've been hitting the gym, haven't you?
Yes, but I was worried when you said heavyweight, it was just a euphemism for fat.
No, I was talking about your muscular frame.
Thank you, Andrew.
Very, very attractive.
Are hands of stone necessarily a good thing? Because it seems like a euphemism for arthritis.
Well, yes, you're right. It is ambiguous. I should be clearer in my compliments.
Good stone?
There we go.
Thank you.
That's what I should have said, and I'll do that tomorrow. But anyway, let's have a look at the front pages for Tuesday. And the Daily Mail is leading with Starmer wades into the culture wars on the side of the woke. Surprise, surprise. The Times has a blood test can detect early sign of Alzheimer's. And The Guardian, medics urged not to report illegal abortions to police. The Metro is leading with a fat-busting balloon pill on the NHS. And the iNews has UK's worst storms in a decade will become the norm. And the Daily Star, who's a pretty potty-mouthed boy then. That's some parrot who's been swearing. Very important news there. Those were your front pages. And of course, it's probably too late for the newspapers to have picked up on the Rwanda bill being defeated in the House of Lords, so that's not going to be on the front pages, so we can't really cover it, Steve, because it's a paper review.
Yeah, do you think the Daily Mail would even be bothered by that? They wouldn't about Rwanda much.
Couldn't care less. Yeah. They don't even know what it is.
They're
so
laissez-faire.
Let's move on to the front cover of the Daily Mail for Tuesday. What are they leading with?
This version's gone with Starmer wades into culture wars on the side of the woke.
Right.
And again, I'm not sure if the Daily Mail likes the woke or not. I'll read deep.
It will clarify as we go through.
Yeah.
What's the gist of it? He's done some kind of speech, hasn't he?
Well, he's pointed out that he says the Conservatives are fighting a culture war,
right?
So that they can have that battle rather than mention what they've got up to over the last decade. And he's pointed out that they've tried to attack things like the RNLI. And he said his take on this is, if you have served this country by being on a lifeboat or something, you deserve some respect. Wait a minute, he's fighting the culture war.
Right, well, this is the problem I have with this, because, you know, I don't think that the culture war has anything to do with left and right. I think the Conservatives have been responsible for some of the worst woke excesses because they've been in power for the last 13 years. But it's very interesting that I would suggest that most of the cultural revolutionaries that we're seeing self-identify as being left-wing, and so it seems a bit odd for Starmer to suggest that responding to those cultural revolutionaries is in itself waging a woke war. Isn't it really just opposing the culture warriors rather than perpetuating?
I think regardless of which angle you attack this war, it's achieving something for you. The Conservatives are using it as a distraction from what they've done for the past 10 years, some of which we know you wouldn't agree with, and then Keir Starmer is managing to not have to talk about any policies because engaging in this fight, no one gets any details, but we all sit there going, yeah, I know which side I like, and I hope they win.
But isn't it important, Nick, these cultural issues?
Massively important. This is complete gaslighting from Starmer. He says that the government got so tangled up in culture wars of their own making. Completely absurd. They're not of their own making. What the government's done is take on the culture wars that Blair, if anything, started. They've continued. Cameron was the heir to Blair. More have emerged since. And what the Tories have actually done is very late tried to tackle a few of the culture wars incredibly late. And it's complete gaslighting from Starmer. It reveals what kind of government Labour's going to be. Remember, Starmer is a Pabloite, which is a subset of Trotskyism. He's a far lefty at heart. This is why he's gaslighting on important things. It's like we're in the Bolshevik Revolution. He's going, oh, stop going on about Lenin. It's real, it's happening, and everyone knows it now.
Yeah.
A few years ago, you sounded a bit mad talking about it. People like my parents thought I was, you know, what's he on about? Now it affects everyone's life, because whether it's someone trying to get into a changing room or, you know, women's sports or anything, the culture war's everywhere.
But it's coming around to it, isn't it? I mean, Starmer has worked out what a woman is. So that is progress. You know,
well,
like a couple of years ago, he wasn't sure, and now he's worked that out.
He has the vibe of a guy who probably didn't get first-hand evidence for a while.
Yeah. That's very a bit below the belt.
Well,
quite literally. But yeah, no. But I think Nick has got a point that, you know, really it's a bit rich coming from Starmer, and because clearly when it comes to the culture war issues, Labour are going to make things worse. I know you're a bit of a fan, Steve, but surely you must see that they're going to make things even worse.
It's not about being a bit of a fan. It's more about being able to take a step back and look at the other things I don't like. So it's not just going, wait a minute, this headline's got Keir Starmer in it, I must hate it. I think you're right to say, look, some of these things are also the responsibility of the Tories. Whether things are going to be worse under Labour, I mean, I don't think I can disagree.
Is criticising the RNLI even a culture war issue, Nick?
No, that's very strange. He even goes as far as calling that a kind of weird McCarthyism. And actually, a couple of things about that. One, that's absurd hyperbole. Two, McCarthy was right. There were loads of communists in Hollywood. And actually, he had a point.
There were people who were falsely accused of that, Nick.
But we now realise...
You've read the Crucible.
He was right.
He had a point. But look, it's absurd. Even in the... I mean, I got the Express, this is the Mail. I was looking at the Express piece. It says woke, a modern term for those concerned with looking at how historical racism and injustice should be addressed in the present. How is that definition creeping into even the Express? I checked out, it's a young journalist who's probably a bit woke, somehow got a job at the Express.
That's not anyone's definition of woke.
It's madness.
Of the word,
it's mad to still have that as a definition, because we know it's not that.
It's like when the word literally got the extra definition of meaning not literally.
I know.
The word woke means one thing and it's total opposite.
Oh, it's hopeless, isn't it? Everyone's got different views of what it means. OK, let's move on now to the front cover of Tuesday's Telegraph. Nick, you've got this one?
Yes, and they have an Alzheimer's story, but we're moving on and doing the Badenoch to intervene in gender pay trans row.
OK.
Which is a very interesting story about Kemi Badenoch. Badenoch, however you want to say it. Sorry, Kemi, if I got it wrong. And she's saying there's this absurd new thing where civil servants have been told by the Government Equalities Office, whatever that is, that they should record gender pay gap figures based on how the workers identify rather than their biological sex, thus making the whole thing pointless. And it's kind of bleakly hilarious in that the whole gender pay gap was a fiction anyway, or at least a vast oversimplification. You know, men prefer to work more hours, they choose different jobs. There's multiple factors. They don't literally pay a woman less for the same job. Some cases there are, like freelance negotiations, where it's different. I understand all that. But the pay gap was already a bit silly. But now they've outwoked the pay gap because it's going to be meaningless because you will be able to put your different gender. Or if you don't identify as anything, no gender, you'll be excluded from the data entirely.
I mean, surely, Steve, if they are suggesting that the gender pay gap is to do with systemic sexism, then the actual biological sex of the individuals concerned is a relevant factor.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this story is hilarious. A great way to ruin data. I mean, the pressure that the BBC must be putting on Gary Lineker to come on, change. Because we get a lot of flack about paying men more. Come on, take one for the team, Gary.
Yeah.
If he flips...
He could just say he's a woman now. It wouldn't actually be out of character for him. I think he could well go down that route.
He's a woman of colour.
He could probably do it.
But it does mess... Yeah, you're right. It messes with the data. But the data, as you say, was flawed. So this is...
Out of interest, Steve, where do you stand on the gender pay gap? Because I know where Nick stands. He's just made that perfectly clear. But when it comes to this idea, you know, it has been illegal to pay women and men different amounts for the same work for about 50, 60 years. Yep. So it doesn't happen. So is it not the case that the gender pay gap is certainly misperceived or misunderstood?
Yeah, I think it's a flaw in the stats. I don't think it's true to say it never happens. I'm sure it does happen. There are court cases that get brought and you find out that it happened, but nowhere near enough to skew the data enough. You do have to look at other factors about how many hours you work.
Well, it's about jobs that you choose. I mean, women are more likely to take part-time jobs as well, and of course there's the maternity issue.
Actually, that point, I was thinking about this story, the idea that somehow the small subset of people who are trans would somehow be massive earners. Are you sure that this is going to skew the data that much?
Well, maybe it wouldn't, but isn't it sort of the principle of the thing, Nick?
It is. You were sort of vaguely mocking me there. You think the exact same, you just expressed it in more genteel terms.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's the exact same, but said in a nicer way. No, but it's ridiculous. And by the way, the Government Equalities Office, I look at that and just think of Javier Milei. I just think, afuera, get rid of all these useless departments doing nonsense. That's what I say.
Nick is starting to quote Javier Milei now, which is fantastic.
Kicking off.
All right, let's move on now. We've got the Metro now. I know it's a paper review, but we'll make an exception today. What are they doing?
I feel shamed about this, that you've given it to me. Fat-busting balloon pills on NHS, what are you saying?
Why would you feel that? No, I'm not.
Hate crime.
You look svelte and gorgeous.
I'll take it. We'll carry on then. So there's a new fat-busting pill, but it's not like a normal pill. We've already got pills, like the Ozempic and all that, I suppose, are injections. But we've got drugs that will make you thin.
Yes.
But for those who can't afford it, which is most people, because they spend all the money on food, you have this option of a pill that will expand in your stomach, it fills your stomach, so you eat less.
Yes.
But the word pill really does not do it service because it's attached to a pipe that they put the water through the pipe. So no one wants a pipe. It's like having your stomach pumped, but it all gets kept down there.
But it doesn't involve invasive surgery. So that is a huge... I mean, a lot of people are wanting to get gastric bands and things like that. The fear is that you have to go under the knife, and that's not very pleasant. This at least alleviates that element of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the thing about this stuff, Nick, is that obviously, even Ozempic and all of that, it doesn't just magically make the fat disappear. It restrains your appetite. And so you don't want to eat as much. And this balloon would surely work. Isn't this a good thing?
Well, I'm very worried about the side effects of some of these drugs. I don't know what I can legally say without getting sued, but some of them have side effects. This one, what disturbs me about this is it's a 15-minute doctor's visit. I don't trust anything that quick when it comes to weight loss. Like, I lost over a stone last year, but I did it so slowly that I received no compliments. If you do it really slowly, no one notices. But things take time like this. It's dire, you know... I'm suspicious of you going to a doctor's office, 15 minutes, he blows up a balloon and sticks it in your gut, and then it becomes a balloon. The whole thing sits wrong with me.
You probably would lose the weight very, very quickly, but as you say, it probably isn't very healthy,
It doesn't sound like it, does it?
No.
To the layman.
Listen, most nights we're saying there's some story about single-use plastics in the human body.
Yeah.
And now you can go and get one put in.
I know. Is it just that we're too impatient and we just want things now? We don't want to do what Nick says, just to do a gradual weight loss programme. We want to lose weight immediately. You know?
Oh, yeah, no, but that actually makes sense, because that's lizard brain versus the rest. Like, eating some food will feel great now, but it takes a year to lose weight. Well, I'll eat food then.
Fair enough. OK, we're going to move on, finally, in this section to the Daily Star. Nick, very important breaking news.
Glad you squeezed this in, Andrew. We're attacking there's bombings in Yemen, and we've got the House of Lords, but the papers didn't get those in time, so they've got who's a pretty potty-mouthed boy then?
Yeah.
And it's 8 potty-mouthed parrots have been introduced to a flock of nearly 100 African greys, and apparently it's just chaos has ensued. I haven't looked at I've only just got the story, Andy, so I haven't investigated in the depth I would like.
I think they're just
but I think it's swearing parrots.
Swearing parrots. I mean, parrots, you know, they can learn swear words.
They can learn them. Who taught them? That's the big question we need to know.
But you would,
and why are they
wouldn't
bringing
you?
them into this country?
If you had a parrot, the words you'd teach it would be the words that would embarrass your guests, wouldn't it?
Yeah, there is a bigger worry here, though, because you've got this one. He's a bit gobby. He'll swear. He'll say bad things. Being introduced to African greys, gonna be racist.
Okay, well, okay, fair enough. You remember that episode of Twin Peaks where the parrot or the talking bird was the last witness to the murder, and so it gets assassinated because it might speak the identity of the killer. So that's a bit of a flashback there. Anyway, that is the end of the first section. Stay with us for part two. We're going to be looking at a two-state solution that Israel may or may not be involved in. We're also going to look at Keir Starmer's thoughts on solving knife crime, something to do with barn dancing, I think, and the latest on BBC impartiality. Don't go anywhere.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel. Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners, your first look at Tuesday's newspapers. I'm still Andrew Doyle, obviously. I'm joined here by Steve N. Allen and Nick Dixon, the Dream Team. And we're going to start this section with Tuesday's Telegraph, Steve. An EU diplomat building his part up. What's all this about?
Two-state solution can be drawn up without Israel at the table, says EU diplomat, because European countries deciding how other nations should be sliced up has always gone well. So why not go back to the classics?
Well, you know, that's how Israel started, of course.
So this will solve it. So
there's a tradition here.
Yeah.
You should observe.
European Union will press ahead, even if you don't have Israel at the talks. Now, let's just do the mocking before we get into the detail. That's ridiculous. Why would you have peace talks where you don't have the parties there? In that case, I could sort out the Romulans and the Klingons, you know what I mean?
You could.
However, there is kind of... The point is that you can't expect nations to be talking that much about peace in the middle of a war. At this point, not even the middle of the war, at this point of the war. So, the EU want to be prepared and have plans. It's not about peace talks, it's about peace plans.
But how do you make these plans when both parties in the conflict refuse to entertain the notion of a two-state solution?
Yeah, I mean, you don't. The point would be maybe the conflict hits a stage when the negotiations about a two-state solution come back on the table, and then the EU go, whoop-um, look what we've already signed that.
I mean, certainly, if there is a Palestinian state, they have to do better than Hamas. I mean, that has to go, doesn't it? So, you know, what would you do? I mean, how would you even begin?
Yeah, and that is in the story. It's kind of, you can miss that because it's not their headline, but yeah, the Palestinians would need a revitalised political alternative to Hamas, so that is clear in there.
Yeah.
But the emphasis, you feel, is a touch anti-Israel. I feel like that's the way the world's going. You've got the US with Biden, would be very different with Trump. You've got France. Oh, I agree more with Germany, who are saying here, can we really have this without Israel? You know, just not involving them seems a bit off. Just putting pressure on them does seem a bit strange to me as a layman.
But do you think, though, Nick, that because Netanyahu is doing terribly in Israel, it doesn't look like he's going to last particularly long, would a two-state solution then become viable with his successor?
It might. Do you feel this is a little too soon after October 7th to just be sort of openly... I suppose, look, everyone wants the war to stop.
Yes.
It just bothered me a little bit. I mean, it says here there were wider complaints over the EU's insistence that peace talks would not address how to deal with the terror attacks by Hamas on and since October 7th. That seems a sort of bit of a sticking point to me as well.
Oh, I mean, it should be.
I understand once Netanyahu's gone, you're saying there's an opportunity for a less hawkish leader, and then you get a two-state...
You might have, if Netanyahu steps down and Hamas have been obliterated or disbanded, then there might be opportunities that might open up. What do you think?
And there'd be an argument that actually you could wait for that moment to happen rather than empty chairing Israel now.
Yeah.
It does have a bad vibe.
It's an internal document, isn't it? But we somehow all know about it. I mean... But also, what have the EU ever made better? I mean, they can't actually get people to stay within the EU.
No.
Are they the people you want to be chairing international peace?
No, that's a very good point. They're not the ones I trust, particularly on anything, frankly. No. Let's move on to the latest on the Rochdale grooming scandal. This is in The Sun. Nick?
Well, this is absolutely horrible. So Rochdale grooming gang ringleader still living in city where he abused kids 9 years after losing right to remain in UK. And this is Kari Abdul Rauf, 54, was part of a 9-strong gang of Asian men, never useful just using the word Asian there, convicted of sex offences against vulnerable girls in 2012. Up to 47 girls as young as 12 plied with alcohol and drugs and gang raped, which I'm sure everyone knows by now. But this guy got 6 years in prison, but he actually only served 2 years and 6 months and was released. Theresa May said he should be sent back to Pakistan, conducive to the public good. Absolutely. But no, he lives in a 3-bedroom, semi-detached house, and he got a 13-year-old girl pregnant, and he's managed to stay because of legal nonsense, human rights.
I was going to ask, it must be the appeals system or something that's holding up. I mean, if the Home Secretary of the time, Steve, says he's got to go, if the appeals that he's put in have been rejected, which they have been, clearly... he shouldn't be here.
The system is failing, isn't it? I don't know how you fix it, whether you have, like, one appeal and then you get to appeal from not being here anymore, which actually has got some sense to it. The thing that really sticks out, given what this guy did, the appeal is based on the human rights because the right to a family, because he's got a wife and children.
Yeah.
Do you know what? Probably should have thought about that before doing the stuff in the first place.
Well, yeah.
How can you claim that your right to a family is the thing that keeps you here when look what you've done?
When you've obliterated other people's families and their lives and their freedoms. Absolutely shocking stuff. OK, well, we're going to move on to this story in the Mirror about knife crime, another jolly topic. What's this one, Steve?
Kids to be encouraged to play sport under Keir Starmer plan to cut knife crime. Now, that makes you think, like, they won't be stabbing because their arms ache too much. No, it's a long shot, isn't it? And he even says that community groups will be vital. But even though this is the Mirror, they should be loving Keir Starmer. The way it's written up is a bit like, oh, you think sports days will fix it. It's more about children without things to do.
But could there be a correlation here? Is it the case that there are youths gangs of youths who have nothing to do, and that actually community centres, I mean, you know, a bit of table tennis, something might distract them.
Yeah, I mean, that's a better point than some of the things that are made in here. He gives a shout-out to Wolverhampton Wrestling Club, because that'll sort out the gang feud.
Well, is there something to it, Nick?
That won't work for stabbing. Table tennis also is too near. What you need is a sport where you're very far away, like tennis, very hard to stab someone, can't get over the net. You can see them coming a mile. Fencing is the most dangerous, almost certain to get stabbed in fencing. So I am making light of it only because it's such an absurd article and kind of ridiculous.
But what can be done? I mean, is it not the case that young men in particular need things to do with their time, and they also enjoy a bit of rivalry, don't they? And when you don't have competitive sports, those kind of things have kind of been eliminated largely from schools.
And a sense of community which you get from community groups as well. Whilst we are making light and just pointing out small details, the Labour leader says that he wants to tackle knife crime and halve violence against women and girls. Why I sit here moaning about the vagueness of stop the boats, but why specifically say, I think there's a certain level that's OK, and it's about half what we got?
Just do it all while you're making stuff up. I'll take it all out. Half.
Yeah, do the whole lot. Have some ambition.
And if you're going to make up a number, say something like 37%, don't do it.
Right, we're going to move on to Tuesday's Guardian now. Nick, and the government are trying to stay neutral about bias.
Yeah, this is Downing Street denies having anti-BBC agenda after bias accusations. So Lucy Fraser was sort of grilled on this, and she said that, look, the BBC tends to be has a problem with impartiality, but she was kind of cornered on it, and she ended up saying, well, look, people perceive there's a problem, and that's enough. She said there are only perceptions, and perceptions are important. So she was backed into a kind of Descartes sort of defence of solipsism. It was quite strange. And then she was pressed to give actual examples. And annoyingly, for us, or me anyway, she couldn't really give any. She kept citing the attack on the hospital in Gaza as one example, but there are so many she could have given. She could have gone Brexit, she could have gone lockdown, she could have gone vaccine, she could have gone the whole of BBC Verify, which is an absurd joke. She could have gone failing to call Hamas a terrorist organisation. She could have gone Emily Maitlis's entire career. She could have gone the woman laughing about Boris Johnson was another classic example. So there are so many. It's not that hard. So it's
actually the one she gave, I think, is pretty good.
It's good. She only had one, but
the Hamas hospital issue.
They trusted Hamas.
It wasn't just a mistake, because I saw the interview, and I think the interviewer, was it Kay Burley, said that it was a mistake. That's just a mistake. It's not just a mistake. When you say that the IDF are targeting medical staff, that wasn't a mistake that would slip through. What I'm saying is the only reason it got through is evidence of bias, quite severe bias, I would say.
But the actual BBC guidelines mean that was bad journalism. That was not sticking to the guidelines on getting two sources to verify the information before you go with it. So the BBC already has guidelines in place to stop that happening, which means it shouldn't be speaking to its bias. Now, you could then make an argument, well, why did it get through? Maybe the bias. But they already have the system in place to prevent the bias.
But what about all of the things that Nick mentions?
Yeah, I mean,
long list.
I just love this story for actually making the government defend whether they're biased against the BBC. We're in this war of, like, you're biased. No, you're biased about my bias. How dare you be biased about bias?
The other part of this is really important, is that Ofcom will be given more powers to investigate the BBC, and you go, OK, that's bants while we're investigating the BBC, and we've got the allegedly Conservative government. It's kind of mildly amusing, but it's going to be horrific when either this government, frankly, or especially Labour, get hold of these powers, start using them to limit free speech online, as we know is going to happen.
But also, I mean, if someone complains about the BBC, you can't complain directly to Ofcom. You have to complain to the BBC, and they decide whether they will pass your complaint on to Ofcom. Surely that's a ridiculous system.
But if they don't, if you're not satisfied with that complaint, you can take it further.
Yes, OK.
You just have to jump through that hoop first.
Speaking of impartiality, though, it's not the most impartial. Hello, I'd like to complain about the BBC. We're the BBC. It's completely absurd.
I mean, isn't the issue? I mean, I've always maintained that it is quite hard for the BBC to remain politically non-partisan. It's actually a difficult tightrope to cross, and I don't want to bash them for that, because I do think it's hard. On the other hand, I think they have continually and singularly failed when it comes to the culture war issues. They're clearly on one side. They have written policies that are on one side. They have guidelines about how you shouldn't misgender rapists and criminals. That is taking a very firm side on the culture war, and that's that's a written document I've seen.
I mean, I've worked at the BBC and seen people bending over backwards to try and not be biased. But the problem is, how do you spot your own biases? The problem is the BBC recruits from such a small group from society. There'll be some biases they don't know they've got, so they can't check.
Well, I think they're pretty clear and maybe they should do something about it. Anyway, that's the end of part 2, but coming up, Labour want to teach kids about white privilege, the boarding school that's letting kids sleep in the dorm of their choice, and one woman's very disappointing experience of the NHS. See you in a couple of minutes.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Go.
Welcome back to Headliners, your first look at Tuesday's newspapers. I'm Andrew Doyle, still here with Stephen Allen and Nick Dixon. Nick, we're going to start with the Telegraph story about late abortions. What's this?
Yes, another moral minefield for me here. Late abortions should not be reported to police, medics urge. So the Royal College of Gynecologists and Obstetricians have, I may have said that right, have issued its first official guidance on the issue. And it's quite strange. They're claiming that NHS staff shouldn't report it, a late abortion. And because the idea is they don't have to report it unless it's in the public interest.
Right.
So they're able to breach confidentiality rules to give information to police about possible crimes, which of course late-term abortion is, but only if it's in the public interest, which introduces an element of ambiguity. But the problem here is that a lot of the times, if you're reporting something like that, it's because of the woman's safety. That's what's not in the piece. Right. It's actually very unsafe often. We had that quite high-profile case. I can't remember the name, but someone received those abortion pills in the post, which had never been sent to her. She took them, you know, and it's horrific late-term abortion. So that's not addressed in the piece.
Right.
So, but it obviously is a moral minefield. I mean, giving the responsibility to the nurse and saying, well, you shouldn't really report it, that seems wrong to me.
Is that not unfair, Steve? I mean, wouldn't the right way about it, if you were objecting to the law, to campaign to change the law, not to encourage medics to break the law?
Yes. I suppose it's quicker to do it this way. Because the idea of slowly trying to change this law, the law that's been around since 18 or whenever it was, I read the story, Clearly, and the law has some good reason to it, so it would be hard to move the law. I think what they're trying to say is make some sort of judgment.
But aren't they then overriding the legal?
Well, no, because it's not saying this is a law, you always report it, because as we find out, the medics don't have to report all breaking of laws.
Right.
If I turn up to the doctors with a sore wrist and say it's because of all the illegal films I've been downloading, they can't breach my confidentiality about that.
Right.
Whereas it's about this public interest side of it.
But one reason it's illegal is because it's unsafe. It was 1861. You're suggesting it's some sort of ancient, silly Victorian patriarchal law, but it's actually unsafe.
Just that it would be harder. No, I think I'd said it. There's some good to this law, but it's been around for such a long time. It'll be a slow process to change it. It's quicker to give advice to the people in the medical industry.
Yeah, it does seem like a minefield to me. Anyway, let's move on, Steve, to Tuesday's Independent now. Labour planning to teach children about white privilege. I'm not surprised.
So Thangam Debonair, who has name privilege, beautiful, isn't it, says that children need the opportunity to ask difficult questions sometimes of our nation's history.
They do have that, don't they?
True, but also notice how different that is to saying, you know what we should be teaching? Lots about white privilege. So let's dive in and see where these...
Has she actually said that?
No. Which bit?
About white privilege?
No, that's the point.
Oh.
The headline is all about she's all wanting to get some white privilege being taught there.
Yes.
She was actually asked about Bernardo's that published online guides for parents that mentioned and talked about white privilege. But if her point of view is saying you need to be able to talk about these things, you need to be able to ask difficult questions, that is very different from law. If you think white privilege is a thing that should be taught as an immutable fact and it needs to be used to beat up white people, that's very different from saying, look, everyone has privilege in different circumstances.
So the problem with that, Steve, is that there are so many school boards and educational bodies that are in fact teaching white privilege and facet aspects of critical race theory as though they were fact.
Yep.
That's going on under the Tories. I'm not sure I trust Labour to deal with that.
Oh, but I can't remember the name of the logical fallacy there, but what you've done is, like, her point has not agreed with your worry.
No.
She has not said the thing you're worried about, but you've just...
No, I'm actually, all I'm doing is raising that supplementary point.
Yeah.
Is it the case that the existing problem we have with white privilege being taught in schools, irrespective of what Debonair says, is it the case that Labour will be well equipped to deal with it?
Possibly not. Do we know that they will make it worse? Possibly not. So we're a bit of a tricky thing. The interesting thing I wanted to point out is that the Culture Secretary, Lucy Fraser, said that the idea of white privilege is a debate and not a fact. But then what we had from Debonair was saying a debate asking questions. I don't even think these two people agree. Now, maybe that's your point, saying that they don't disagree and it's a problem because no one's solving the problem.
Nick, maybe you should step in and solve this.
I will. Firstly, never accuse Andrew Doyle of a logical fallacy.
No, but
You've seen the people on X get crushed day after day. Never works, so I would never do that. Secondly, I don't understand... Steve's point seems like a distinction without a difference. She was asked about Bernardo's guide about white privilege, teach your white friends, family and colleagues about their privilege. So she is commenting on that, so I don't understand the point there. But...
Well, can I jump in and
yes.
answer that? I think what she's saying is, that shouldn't be stopped. Do you think that the mentioning of white privilege in literature sent to parents should be stopped?
Right.
No, I don't think it should be banned.
So my argument here is, she's saying, no, questioning is good. My argument is that following white privilege doctrine is unlikely to be questioning in the current context. It's more likely to be following a cult doctrine. Questioning would be saying, in this context that we're in now, in a school or something, saying something like, what about the amount of poor white boys that don't go to university? Or, you know, why don't we ever talk about the Ottoman Empire? Those things. Why is it always a transatlantic slave trade? And we ended it, by the way. You don't hear that. You hear one narrative. So questioning would be to question the white privilege.
I think that's an interesting point. It would be interesting to have a follow-up question to Debonair and say, would you be happy with the idea of saying, why do so many people teach the concept of white privilege as though it's an uncontested fact in schools? Asking that question, that would be an interesting question.
Yeah, and until we get that question answered, Nick, you've ended up agreeing with Debonair. You both want difficult questions to be asked. So until you find out which questions...
Well, you'll be very generous in your interpretation of what Debonair
She's gaslighting us into pretending she wants critical thought. When she doesn't, get ready for a Labour government. It's going to be hell.
Well, maybe she is a major critical thinker. You're right, there's no evidence here one way or the other. But I just have my doubts, to be honest. Let's move on to this story. Daily Mail. Nick, a boarding school doubling down on its position on trans pupils. This I find absolutely amazing.
Yes, boarding school that charges $45,000 a year and taught Lily Allen and Daniel Day-Lewis refuses to back down over plans to let trans people stay in dorms of their preferred gender, declaring we treat all our young people as individuals. A very long headline, but the point is, that's the whole story, really, so that's good. It's done it for me. This is B-Dale's, of course, and it's completely absurd. We treat them as individuals, so they're going against all protocol and all safety and all sanity, really.
So wait, so a boy who says he's a girl will be able to sleep in a dorm, actually can sleep in a dorm at B-Dale's with girls? And that's okay?
Because that person is an individual, Andrew, with no gender or biological sex.
Are there not
individual.
other individuals in that dorm who might be a little worried about that?
That's true. They're individuals as well, but they don't matter as much as this. It's confusing, Andrew. You've almost found a flaw in this whole argument. I'm rethinking all my life choices. But one thing that's notable here, you say you're amazed, but actually, as you pointed out often yourself, it's the elite schools, it's the poshest that go along with the woke stuff the most. Woke is an elite phenomenon.
It's always the posh stuff. But, Steve, this is a major safeguarding risk, of course. Now, the government's introduced its new trans guidance for schools, long overdue, but the problem is they haven't said that it's mandatory. And, of course, that's what they should be saying.
Yes. Just let me do the annoying Steve thing of finding the flaw in the story just a little bit, just so I can get
Go on.
more...
I know you need this. This is how you get your kicks.
This is what I love.
Yeah.
So the headline, because it's the Daily Mail, for some reason they point out the celebs that went there, as if we're going to go like, well, Lily Allen went there. But anyway.
To be fair, the boarding school probably does that quite a lot.
Yeah.
They're probably quite proud for some reason of Lily Allen.
So the headline has... some of the songs are right. The headline says, refuses to back down over plans. Actual story, refuses to clarify its position. That's actually different.
But surely now that they've been given this quite clear guidance, they should say, no, of course, we will accommodate the children according to biological sex.
But be right and put that in the headline rather than making the headline actually...
No, that's a quibble. That's a quibble. Well, I'll accept that. However, we have seen sexual assaults within schools. There's a case going on in Loudon in Virginia at the moment where a girl was raped in a bathroom by a boy dressed as a girl because he said he was a girl. There's parents are currently suing the school for $30 million. It's not a trivial point.
No, it's not a trivial point. I was about to... My second half of the non-Steve bit is to say it's an unworkable policy. You're right to say the guidelines already mean it's not allowed, so if any parent surely just goes, hang on a minute, I mean, it'd be nice if you didn't have to make the effort of suing, but anyone who does make any sort of action, part of me thinks it's an unworkable policy, but the policy signals a virtue. So it's almost as if they never want it to be used, but they want to have on their brochure, look what we offer.
Well, one of the arguments they always say is that, well, the girls at the school never complain. A lot of girls we know are too nervous to complain. They don't want to be perceived as bigots.
Yeah.
But actually, I would suggest that most of them certainly don't want a male undressing in their space.
Plus, how they know they're girls.
Well, there's that. If there's no such thing as biological sex.
They're individuals.
We're all just individuals. OK, let's move on to a next story now. This is in the Financial Times. And, Steve, is feminism working?
Well, not for these men, eh?
Oh, I know. Don't get me started.
Have you ever met any? Oh, they're terrible, aren't they? Shorter hours for men adds to strain on UK labour market. It's the article looks at how we've reduced our working hours.
Yes.
In general, just the average has gone down from 33.1 in 98 down to 31.8. It doesn't seem like a huge amount. They say that's around 300,000 fewer workers. But still, of the whole workforce, doesn't seem huge.
No.
But that's been blamed for our lack of productivity and things. There are reasons why people have worked less. Younger people tend to not think, oh, I should give my life away to work.
Yes.
But this is what bothers me about this story. It's all been blamed on the men working less. And yet we're constantly told that you've got to do something about work-life balance. You find a Hollywood film where there's a dad with a job, the moral at the end of it is work less. Why are you working all the time?
Well, they say it's better for you psychologically, you know, and there have been studies into this that people say that a 4-day week is much better for you psychologically than a 5-day week. You know, and, you know, since the pandemic, a lot of people are just deciding they don't want to work at all.
But everyone can take time off, but it's only the blokes who get told off for working short hours. You're ruining the economy.
Nick, do you have a view on this?
Yeah, men deserve a break.
Yeah.
We've done all the difficult jobs, that oil rig thing I've seen on X. And
you did a great job on that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Exactly. No one thinks about that. We're out there every day. We're up the electricity poles fixing stuff.
Electricity
No
poles?
one thinks about the men working on the infrastructure. That was Gordon Peterson. No one thinks about the men. We deserve to chill for a bit.
Who's really got
At the same time, also, I don't think we should work from home and just do nothing. So I'm torn, but mainly I'm pro-men. That's my stance.
We should be allowed to work less. Because literally, I mean, men die at work all the time. It's a thing that kills a lot of men. So let's just work less.
I hear that's why the stats show that men don't live as long. It's because there's so many of us that die young, it averages it out. And actually, we probably do have the same lifespan.
It's literally everything kills men more, though. Inherited diseases, acquired diseases, accidents, murders, suicide. If there's a way of dying, the men
working with Lewis Schaefer.
Oh, God, that's an absolute killer. All right. Well, look, just one more section to go in tonight's headliner, so do stay with us. We're going to be talking about foreigners' fascination with the UK slang, the doomsday clock, and an unusual bikini model. You don't want to go to bed yet.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners, your first look at Tuesday's newspapers. And we're going to start this section with The Times. And this story is well good, innit, fam?
That is my favourite thing I've ever witnessed. I was worried that me reading out this headline I wouldn't sound like cool enough, but thank you for setting a bar.
That is proper ghetto, innit?
Oh dear.
That's actually uncomfortable, even as a joke.
So the headline is, foreigners bare keen to flex by using English slang, no cap. But I feel so much better about it not sounding...
What does no cap mean? Does that mean no cap locks?
Not lying.
Oh, no cap.
That's true.
Okay.
Yeah, as in, cap.
I have no idea what it means.
No, me neither. But it's a survey of language teachers. Apparently they're asked a lot when people are learning English.
Yes.
They go, "Oh, what's all this about beef?" And they don't mean the ones that we know. So actually, because it's in the Times, it's just a reason for the Times to list things that young people say and for us to go, aren't they weird?
But isn't it the case that young people just naturally learn the slang? I mean, we had slang when I was at school, you know?
I meant learning English as a second language.
Oh, I see,
it's
OK.
not English kids. You're right.
But even the foreign language kids will learn slang quite naturally, I would have thought.
Yeah.
You know?
And they've gone to the effort of making a list of some of the things. Pop off means go crazy, dead means boring, salty is upset.
Did you not know these, though? I knew all of them. Does that just mean I'm on the internet too much?
I thought, if I bother to learn these, I will then be able to communicate with the kind of people who talk like this. So I'm probably fine
but
with
we
that,
all had it.
actually.
I mean, I had like up the apples and pears for stairs.
How old are you?
That's Cockney rhyming.
72 years old.
Why did you do that? Might be in the Midlands.
What do you think about this one?
Well, I knew all the terms, so I'm thinking this is one of these sort of boom articles. Oh, you might not understand these terms. Like, no, I know all the terms.
Is that just because you're down with the kids?
Yeah, I've worked out why. It's because I watch those shows, you know those clips where it's all like young women saying stupid things about dating? I watch all those, and they always say no cap in those.
Look, I mean, this mentions Riz, which is the word of the year. I only heard of that when I read an article about it. I didn't know what.
No, I already knew that one as well. I think you guys are a bit behind. You need to get on the internet more, be a bit cooler.
You are very lit.
Thank you.
I think getting on the internet more is the worst advice you've ever given me. I need to get off the internet. Let's move on now to this story on Tuesday's Mirror. If you're suffering from more than one illness, then tough luck.
Yeah, this is mum in tears after only being allowed to report one problem per appointment in the Soviet Union. No, it's at GP. I mean, this is absolutely obscene. I mean, well, not obscene, but it's just our NHS, isn't it? I mean, our NHS. Look, lots of hard workers and all that, but it's broken. I mean,
that sounds really draconian.
Yeah, and they've done this weird justification for it that somehow it's better for patient safety or something. It's a bizarre sophistry.
What's the logic here?
I didn't see any logic.
They have to kind of prioritise what their ailments are, because often things are connected. Often things come in pairs. If you're growing horns, will they only treat one of the horns?
Yeah, the problem is with Western medicine, obviously it's the best and, you know, acupuncture can't cure everything, but the problem is it's not holistic, to use that word. So, yeah, they've written, we understand that patients may have multiple concerns and it can be challenging to address them all in a single appointment. However, by implementing this policy, we aim to provide focused and comprehensive care to each patient. What, by saying, no, you can't tell me about that?
Steve, surely you get an appointment at the doctor and that covers all your problems, right? That's what it should be.
Look, I can understand putting a limit of maybe 5, because you know what some people are like. They'll be sat there going, my back's playing up as well, and it's not been right since the, you know, they...
Oh, I'm tired all the time.
Yeah.
Everyone's tired all the time. Get over it.
But you get a time limit, and maybe that should be the thing, that if you're going to sit there for 3 hours going on about all your bits, then maybe you do need a longer appointment, which you can book for, but come on. If you book an appointment and you've got time at the end of it, then you do surely have the right to mention that. There are so many things that get caught that way. This is not about patient safety, because patient safety would be while you hear anything else that a doctor might want to have a look at.
I'm sick and tired of it, you know, because it's difficult enough to get an appointment now. You know, with the receptionist triaging the problem.
You've got to be on for an hour in a queue, and then the receptionist asks you what the problem is. I've always thought that's completely wrong. I'm not going to tell you. Why am I telling you?
Yeah,
it's
they're
madness.
not qualified.
Yeah, that's so un-English.
OK, let's move on now. The Times, bad news for Scottish dogs, Nick?
Yeah, passive smoking raises risk of cancer in Scottish Terriers. Study finds. This is a big story. So, yeah, that's it, really. I mean, that's what I'm trying to elaborate, but there really isn't any more to it.
Why specifically Scottish Terriers?
It's a great question, which Steve can answer. But
OK,
they're especially vulnerable, but I haven't figured out why.
I do apologise.
Is it because their owners are more likely to smoke? Is that the issue?
That's the thing. Yeah, they really get hooked on it because they're Scottish. No, it's... This is why you should test things on animals, because we've just found out that Scottish Terriers are more likely to be impacted by getting cancer from passive smoking.
Is that? I mean,
it's sad.
You just said the same thing again.
It's a strange story. It doesn't merit any more of our time. Let's move on to this one. This is the Daily Star. Time is ticking for humanity, Steve.
The doomsday clock. This is when we find out how likely we are to reach Armageddon.
Oh, can't come too soon.
It's not how clocks work. This is what bothers me. I know I'm a pedant in many ways, but we all understand the idea of things running out, bank accounts, or things being closer to it. Get a ruler out, but... They've decided, or a fuse. You could still use seconds, but we'd have the idea of it. But the idea is, this clock tells us how close we are. It doesn't impact anything. Did you live your life differently in 1991 when it was 17 minutes away from the end of the world?
No.
Or, as it turned out, 17 minutes later didn't happen.
Nick, very quickly, your thoughts on the doomsday?
Well, people talk about it as if it's something scientific. It's an art project that was started in the Cold War or whenever, and but it's all it is. It's an art project. I mean, yes, there is a risk of nuclear war, but not because of the doomsday clock.
No, so let's not worry about it. OK, well, look, the show's nearly over, so let's have another quick look at Tuesday's front pages. So the Daily Mail is leading with Starmer wades into the culture wars on the side of the woke. The Times has got blood test can detect early sign of Alzheimer's. The Guardian is running with medics urged not to report illegal abortions to police. The Metro has a fat-busting balloon pill that you can get on the NHS. And the iNews has UK's worst storms in a decade will become the norm. Scary stuff. and this frivolous piece of nonsense from the Daily Star about parrots that swear. Those were your front pages. That is all that we've got time for. Thanks ever so much to my guests, Steve N. Allen and Nick Dixon. And Steve is going to be back tomorrow at 11 o'clock with Leo Kearse and Josh Howie. But if you're watching the 5 a.m. repeat right now, then please do stay tuned because it's time for breakfast.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening. Storm Jocelyn will be arriving this time tomorrow on Tuesday evening. Not as intense as Storm Isha, but nevertheless could cause some further disruption. Brewing out in the Atlantic at the moment. There is the next storm system. Storm Isha continues to clear away. Still plenty of isobars on the chart. It is still pretty gusty out there this evening. Plenty of showers too, packing in across Scotland in particular. But the showers will tend to ease off in most places, generally becoming clear overnight, and the winds will ease down further until the cloud thickens and we start to see wet weather coming into Northern Ireland by dawn. With the clearer skies and as the winds ease, we could see some pockets of frost across Scotland, but for most of us, we'll start Tuesday at 4 or 5 degrees. Many in the east will start dry and bright, but the rain will spread into the west and then become pretty much across all parts by lunchtime. The heaviest rain, though, over Western Hills. The rain could cause some